Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. In today's video, we're going to be continuing with our Global War 1914 Masterclass series. And this one is titled The Western Front. So what is the Western Front? Well, historically, that would have been here in northern France, in between Germany and France. The Germans attacked first, and trench lines were set up when they figured out that you couldn't just rush into machine guns and artillery, and that you actually had to take cover. This was the first war where that was something that was different than all the wars that had been fought before that. And so trench warfare began. And the Western Front in World War I was a much bigger deal than any other theater of war that you would have found in World War II. Not that they were less important at the time, like we're talking Eastern Front between Germany and Russia, and the war in the Pacific, of course, with Japan and the United States and Britain, and of course between Japan and China, and North Africa, and the Battle of Britain, and once Normandy happened, then of course there was also a Western Front that was created in Europe. So lots of important theaters. But in this war, in World War I, the Western Front dominated the war, because that's what it all centered around, was that battle right there. And there was battles going on all over. Not quite as extensive as World War II, but there were other fronts in the war. But this one was the one where most of the resources went to. Most of the fighting happened in, and the iconic images that we get over 100 years later. If you see a picture of World War I, then 99% of the time it'll be a picture on the Western Front. It was very big. And it's also big in this game, as you might imagine, because, of course, if you're going to recreate World War I, then the Western Front's going to be a big part of that. And so we're going to do a video on it today, just talking about the Western Front, forgetting about everything else. So let's get into it. First of all, before we get going on talking about anything, I just want to show you what we're looking at here. So this is actually just a piece of the map that I've blown up. If you're wondering why it looks so weird around the edges there. There's the map right there. It's just like I've put this in here and blown up a section, and this is the Western Front. It's got all of the relevant information that we need about the Western Front in here. It's got all the manpower icons that we're going to be talking about, and all the way around, all the things that we need to know about when it comes to the Western Front, including in Britain, because we also have to talk about the resources that are going to go into this, right? And so that's why I made this up, is especially for this video. But I mean, I used it on the last video that I did. And by the way, I'm not going to get right into trench lines and stuff in this video. I mean, we'll refer to the trench lines, but if you want to know about trench lines and how to make them and how to break them, that was in the last video. So go to my channel and go back to the last video on the Masterclass series and take a look at the video about trench lines, because that is going to go hand in hand with this video. This is just going to be more specific on the region of where the trench lines are located. Anyway, so let's get into what exactly we're looking at here. The reason we need to take all of this information in is because it's not just about the Western Front, it's about where the resources are going to come from in order to fight that battle. And so when you look at the manpower icons, for instance, this thing is a silhouette of a soldier with a number inside of it. That tells you how many infantry class or cavalry or camels that you can put in that territory. You can't exceed that amount. And there's a reason for that, and it's because there just isn't any more humans than that. Like you couldn't make something out of nothing. And some of the other games that we've played, including the 36 game, but also Axis and Allies, like you can just put as many as you want there as long as you have that many factories. And Of course, humans didn't come from factories, they came from women, right? And so, you know, like you had to have the population centers in order to have those manpower icons. And so those are important in this game. And so when you look at, like if you add up all the German manpower icons, for instance, you're going to get 13 manpower. So on one turn, you can only put 13 infantry class units in there. And that can be, you know, like regular infantry, it could be militia, it could be trench fighters, it could be their elite infantry, which can actually go in their home territory. Could be mountain infantry, could be naval infantry. And then France has 10 manpower in their territory. Like if you add up all the manpower icons in France, that's going to add up to 10. And so they can only put 10 on there. And they can't put the elites on there. They actually go, here, let's just move this down a bit. So this is down across the water. They have to go down in Algeria or Tunisia. But that's okay though, because at least they're close enough. It's just one transport ride away from getting them up to the Western Front if you wanted them there. Unlike Britain, where theirs are over in India over here. That's where the Gurkhas go on. They have to go on in India. So it's unlikely that you will see any Gurkhas on the Western Front, but that was historical. They did not have their colonial troops coming to Europe to fight for them in the battle in Europe. I mean, they had the Canadians come and the Australians, but they didn't have, let's say, the darker shades of people coming. And I don't mean that to be derogatory. That's actually a thing. The British did not want their subjects, let's call them, to come up to Europe and learn how to shoot white people. Remember, it was over 100 years ago, so thankfully we've come a ways since then. But anyway, so you're not going to see many Gurkhas there just because it would take a lot just to get them there. You know, the amount of resources and using your transports and everything, it's easier just to build infantry or something, right? The Gurkhas are not going to be that much of a benefit for you because all they are is, you know, +1 attack and defense and their mountain infantry. But as you can see from this map, there's not a lot of mountains in northern Europe where we are. So then Britain, when you look up at Britain here, then their manpower icons add up to 8. Now on this little map, you see there's only 7, but if you look up in Scotland up there, there's 1 as well. So you could put 1 in Scotland, so that totals 8. And then you got your factory productions. Here, let me just go get some factories here. So factory production isn't as important because the things that you put on factories cost more money. So there's a couple of major factories for the French. There's a couple major factories for the British. And the Germans have 2 major factories to begin the game with. One in Western Germany, 1 in Berlin. They've got a minor factory in Eastern Germany, and they've got a medium factory in Bavaria. But this is something that you could and probably should upgrade to a major as well. Just if no other reason, then you get that that extra role for your technology. And then there's also one in the Netherlands here. And that, you know, like if somebody takes the Netherlands, then you get you'll have an extra factory right there. The only other things that are, I guess you could call them facilities, there is a fortification in Belgium, and there's a fortification in Lorraine. And this is not as important, but there is also an air base in Western Germany. But I say that's not as important because it only gives +1 to the movement ability of an airship. That's all that does, really. So that's not really a big advantage for Germany or disadvantage for the other side. It's just a thing. It's not nothing, but it's not going to be significant. So now when I say that factories aren't going to be as important as the manpower icons, it's because you've got more than enough factory capacity. Like I don't think you're ever going to be able to buy 10 artillery for the French. Like you just don't have that much money. And the same with Germany. Like if you upgrade that factory, then that's 16, you know, and I don't think you're going to buy 16 of anything for the Germans. And then again, 10 for Britain. Even if you have that much money, like they probably would have on when they get their income up. Sometimes you can get it over 50. So, I mean, you could buy 10 artillery, but the problem with that is that you would also need 10 transports to get them across the water. So the factories aren't as important as those manpower icons. The manpower icons are really the thing that you really need to take note of. So the next thing that you need to notice is that Northern Europe is hardly any mountains at all. But Southern Europe is. Southern Europe is where the Alps are, right? So most of the Western Front is not going to have any mountains in it. There is a part here in Belgium where going from Western Germany, actually that's not even going to be a mountain border right there, because you can get through this part right here. Let's get up closer to that. This is why I made this thing so it would be bigger. Here, let me go to the other side too. So mountains are just not a factor whatsoever on the Western Front. Like here, you can go through here from there to there, right? From icon to icon, and those mountains are not in the way. So these mountains are not going to do anything for you. There's mountains over here in Bavaria, but again, from roundel to roundel, there is none. So the mountains are not in the way there, and of course they're not in the way anywhere else. Rivers, different story. So there is a river here that cuts between the two sides, right? Like Germany's on this side of the river and France is on this side of the river, and also Belgium would be on that side of the river. Netherlands would be on the Germany side, because you can see that river goes in here. And you need to take note of that, because if you're attacking from Belgium to Netherlands, then you're going to have a river penalty. But attacking from Netherlands to Belgium, you're not going to have a river penalty, because the river is on your side of the border. And that same holds true attacking from Western Germany to Belgium and from Bavaria to Lorraine. No river penalty, but coming the other way, there is a river penalty. And the only other thing to do with rivers that might be something to note is this little stretch of river right here that is in Paris. So if you were to come through here from Picardy to Paris, then you would have to cross a river. But that's about the only thing. Like, I mean, it does here, but there's not much that you're going to be doing attacking this way. And same with attacking from Paris to southern France, there's a river. But again, you're probably not going to be attacking there, right? So then let's talk about the borders and what you're bordering. So like I said, there is mountains, but they're down south. So if you were to go from Italy to southern France, then there's going to be a mountain border. And of course, Switzerland, which is a strict neutral. So either side, if they wanted to go in there, they would have to attack Switzerland first. They couldn't just influence it, because you can't influence a strict neutral. So there's mountains there. That's it's important to note that Switzerland is not adjacent to southern France. I have had that question before, but if you zoom right in there, like if you take yourself a magnifying glass, you will see that it comes to a point here. And so Switzerland is not adjacent to southern France. It is adjacent to Lorraine and to northern Italy, but it's not adjacent to southern France. And the same holds true up here in Belgium. Belgium is adjacent to Picardy. Picardy is adjacent to Lorraine. Lorraine is adjacent to Bavaria. Bavaria is adjacent to Western Germany, but they don't go crossways. Like Western Germany is not adjacent to Lorraine. Bavaria is not adjacent to either Picardy or to Belgium. Western Germany is not adjacent to Picardy as well. So whether you set up the trench line here so that the only way through is through these two territories, or if you have a trench line, like if the Germans attack Belgium and then you have a trench line here and a trench line here, those are your options, unless you do attack Switzerland, in which case that would add another trench line, but that's not likely to do that, except for maybe late in the game when you need to open up another front for some reason, and is probably going to involve something to do with Italy, because Germany would be splitting up their trench line. They would be splitting this in two, wouldn't they? They would have to have guys on this part of the trench line and on this part of the trench line instead of just one of them. And the same holds true up here in Belgium. Like, it's probably going to be the Germans that attack Belgium, because it would be a penalty for the Allies to attack Belgium, and it's quite a big penalty. Like, it's only 5 IPP, which isn't a big deal, but the big deal is that it would be -5 on the peacetime income of the United States. And that is, that is significant, because you want the Americans in there as soon as possible. And that's just going to push them back at least a turn, because you only roll a D6, right? So that's almost a full D6 just in a penalty, and that's not something that you want. And so, I played a lot of games of this, and I can't tell you if it's better to have just the one trench line, or if it's better to have the 2 trench lines for either side. Like, it's interesting that you can do either one, but I haven't found a marked difference in doing it that way. The one way that Belgium would go to the Allies would be influencing them, because they do start at level 1 for the British to begin the game. But like, if you play the prequel first, I mean, who knows what it's going to be by the time the war starts. It could be +2 for the Germans by then, or +2 or 3 for the British by then. You never know. Netherlands starts at no influence, so they're at 0 basically, and both sides would have to influence them the same, but that could be getting close by the time the war begins. You never know. But anyway, that's something to take note of as well, is the influence on them. And I tell you, like, if the British get these guys at 3, then you might want to just attack them with the British anyway, or sorry, with the Germans anyway, because if they're going to go the way of the Allies, then it makes no difference to you if you're attacking a neutral or if you're attacking the British. Certainly, if the British do influence them, then they're going to be putting some stuff in there, and then it's going to be harder to take it out, because it does have that fortification. Although if you watch the last video, you know that fortifications aren't really that strong. I mean, they're something, but they're not overwhelming or anything. But like, it is just another thing. It's hard enough to attack in this game, and to have a fortification there that's going to roll 2 first strike at 5. I mean, just that is something more. And the fact that you could put militia or colonial infantry in there, and they would be boosted up to +2, then, like, it is something. So the Germans have to watch that anyway. That would be one reason why you would extend that line to Belgium, is if they got it up to stage 3, or should I say level 3. So that's something. So then we've talked about rivers and manpower icons and factories and everything. About the last thing to take note of, well, actually there's 2 more, but we'll get into the first one, and that's railways. So railways connect just about everything here, but notably there is 2 things they don't connect. One is from Western Germany to Belgium, and the other one is from Lorraine to Picardy. Those are not connected. So this one is more important. And the reason that's so important is because if Germany is in Belgium, this would probably be your front line. I mean, it might not. It could be Picardy. But even if it is, you don't have a rail line in there. And the reason that is significant is because then you don't have a supply path there. So, for instance, if you wanted to put some gas in there, like, you get to put gas down wherever there's artillery, as long as it's in a supply path to a factory, you wouldn't be able to put gas in there unless you built yourself a rail line in there. And, like, that's something you definitely want to think about, is putting that rail line in there, just so that you can do that, right? That is pretty important. Because if this is your front line and you go to attack that, and then the end of your turn you have to put your gas here, well, now you don't have gas to attack them next turn, right? You have to wait another turn so that you can walk that gas over with some artillery, and that's just going to take you an extra turn to be able to attack again. So that's significant that there isn't the rail line here or here, because even if you did take Lorraine out, then you still wouldn't have a rail line into there, or like there's a gap there. Put it that way. Now, if you had Netherlands, then you would have a rail line into there. But if you don't have the Netherlands, then you're not going to have it. And taking Belgium out for the Germans is not the same as taking the Netherlands out. Belgium, you're only going to give up 2 colonies and 1 infantry that's down south in Africa. Whereas the Netherlands, you're going to give up a whole bunch of territories, plus a bunch of navy if the Germans attack the Netherlands. So there's a bunch of boats that are already here, plus there's a bunch of boats that are in the South Pacific. And so attacking the Netherlands is a much bigger deal than attacking the Belgians. Anyway, so that's the lay of the land that you're looking at there. When I talked about how many manpower icons you had for the Germans, you have to remember that you're going to need some of those manpower icons against the Russians. You're going to need to have troops going to the Eastern Front as well. So that's why it's important that you have as many manpower icons as you can, and that you use them well. Like, you try to put a maximum amount of stuff in there, unless of course you're winning big time on the Western Front and you can afford to relax there, but that's not really likely. Like most games, it's going to be pretty intense in here and pretty close, or it's going to be over real quick. Like, it could be that you take out Paris really quick, but it's more likely that it's going to be a long fight on the Western Front. Let's just take a pause here now, and I'll put down the rest of the units on the map. Okay, so I've got everything set up here. Now, we're going to start off with the Germans. The first thing to note is that both sides are vastly different. Much different from each other and how they play each other. That's why I'm going to split it up into 2. Like, we'll do the Germans first and then we'll do the Allies second, just because that's the way they go in the turn order. So what we have here is the setup for the 1912 game, and that is if you're playing the prequel. And there's actually quite a big difference in the 2 games. It's not just the things that could happen down in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, that's going to be the biggest change down there. And in the Mediterranean and Mexico, there's a fight over that, of course. The Balkans is the big fight. But it's also a big difference on the Western Front, partly because there's a different amount of units that you put on. Like, there should be more units than this if you do the 1914 setup. So that's going to make a difference, although not a huge one. But the real big difference is your income, because if you're starting with the 1914 setup, then you've got 35 IPP for the Germans. But here, because your last turn you were at peace, you've only got 4 IPP. That's your peacetime income. And you have 6 infantry that are in your reserves. You wouldn't have any reserves if you were playing the 1914 game. Now, there's an opportunity in the prequel to put units into your reserves if you draw the right random event. Like, there's a couple of random events that allow you to do that. It's not really that much of an advantage, because you can also save your money if you want. And you can't put your reserves on until the end of the first turn. And so if you were to buy them right now, like let's say this is the start of 1914 now, and you played the 1912, you played the prequel, well, you're going to be able to, like, whether you saved 3 IPP and bought an infantry, or you bought an infantry 2 or 3 turns ago, it doesn't really matter, right? Because that infantry is not going to go on until the end of this turn. And so it doesn't really matter what you do there. One of the things that would make a difference, I guess, it would be if you, in the prequel, if you upgraded this factory here in Bavaria to a major factory. That's something that you can think about. But there's so many things for you to do in the prequel that that might not be the option that you choose. And that's okay if you don't. Although one thing that is a benefit if you do that, of course, is that you will get an extra dice when you roll for technology. The sooner you get that factory, the sooner you'll start getting the roll, and the more rolls you get. Truth be told, when you play the full game with the prequel, it seems like you get about 3/4 through the game or more, and then you pretty much ran out of useful technologies for you, regardless of what side you're playing. I guess the British could probably use more because there's a couple of things, convoy system and depth charges, that are useful in the war in the Atlantic for you that Germany can't really use. But by this time, you've gotten most of the technologies, especially if you're rolling 3 dice instead of 2. So that's not a huge deal either. It's almost just as important that you have the ability to put more stuff in Bavaria, depending on where the line is, if the line is in Lorraine or if the line is in Bavaria here, because it is nice to be able to put 5 artillery on, or 5 things that aren't infantry class, but usually it would be 5 artillery. Anyway, so that's one thing that you could do. The other thing that you can do is you can purchase ships or upgrade your ships that are on the construction chart, right? You can move them along in there. So you can't buy the ground units, but you can do stuff with the ships. I don't know that I would do that with Germany though. You can see with the setup what I've done here is Germany has 1 transport here and Britain has 1 transport. Those are the only things that matter when it comes to the Western Front. I am going to do a video, it'll be the next video, and that'll be the war in the North Atlantic. So I'm not going to get into the naval aspect too much, other than to talk about how ships relate to it. I'm not just going to get right into the ships until the next video though. But I did put the transports on because they do matter at the beginning. We're talking about the land battle here, and so you will be using them, or you could use them, you know, like if you wanted to attack London, for instance, or Petrograd. That's something else that you can invest in during the prequel, is buying some transports. I don't know that that's a really good idea though. Like, I haven't gone down that road. It's an interesting theory, but attacking Petrograd though, that's turning the the Russians into Soviets way too soon, as far as I can see, and you know, like, it's a good chance for them to win the game, I think, if they become Soviets on the second turn, right? So I don't know, that's a great idea. But, you know, like attacking London, that's something that you could certainly think about. I mean, they don't have that much stuff on London. There's only 3 ground units there. You would have to get through the British Navy. It is doable, but if you don't get it, then you've got the Americans are going to get an increase because of attacking the British like that. Like if the British are able to take it back. So, you know, I don't know that that's a really great thing either. So anyway, those are some of the things that you can try, but that is not my favorites. Let's talk a little bit more about the other things that maybe I would be in favor of doing. So one of them, in the rules, is that Germany can take 5 units from one territory and move them to another territory anywhere in Germany, and then begin their turn. You can't take, you know, 2 units from here and 2 units from here and 1 unit from over there and move them all to Bavaria. They all have to come from one territory and go to another territory. So probably what it will be is you going from here to here, or from you going from the Western Front and you're going to go heavy on the Eastern Front over here. All I've set up for the Eastern Front on the Russians is just these guys here. But just know that there's a bunch of guys on the Eastern Front. And that's certainly something that you could try as well, but that's not what this video is about. Maybe I'll get into a video on the Eastern Front. But I did set these guys up over here because you can see here that it's probably not a good idea to take 5 units from over here and take them to the Western Front, especially not with the 1912 setup, because you're not buying that much stuff, right? Like when you look at the manpower icons over here, it's only 1 here, 2 here, and 1 down here, right? So you can't put that much stuff down over here with you not being able to buy a bunch of artillery. Then, and it's just, if you move stuff out of there, then the Russians have got the jump on you over here. And certainly if I'm the Russian player, I'm going to take advantage of that, right? Anyway, so that's something to consider. I think one thing that I would probably try to do if I didn't upgrade my Navy somewhat is I might save at least 3 IPP, maybe even 5 IPP to either buy an infantry or an artillery. That's something that I would at least try to do, because when the game first starts, or when the war first starts, then there's a bit of a race there. And it matters that Germany goes first, because they can, that's it, that's their advantage, is that they can be the first ones to take the shot, the first ones to race towards Paris. And it is possible. Like I tell you, if you can, you'd have to have good rolling. Like you'd have to beat them in the rolling game, not just break even, but beat them. And that's by moving 5 units down here. And you don't even have to take the cavalry, because the cavalry can gallop down there and over. But you take Lorraine, and then you go after Paris. But again, you'd have to win that battle handily, because you're going to take Lorraine, and then they've got quite a bit of stuff to take you back with, right? So then you'd have to win that battle as well pretty handily. But it is possible. It's possible to get them in about 2 or 3 or 4 turns to take Paris. And that's because it's going to take the British some time to get in there. That's your advantage, right? It's going to take the British some time to get 2 turns over here, or 2 spaces over here. Like they can get to Picardy on the first turn, but again, they don't have much stuff, right? They've only got 2 infantry and an artillery back here and a cavalry. So that's all they're going to be able to put into Picardy on the first turn. Maybe playing the 1914 game, it might be a little easier for you to do that, because then you'd be able to buy more stuff for Germany, and maybe it would be easier for you to get in there. It's something that you can try as well. But that's what I would try for if I was the German player to begin with, is go hard, see if I can get to Paris. And it's likely that you won't, but just in the try, as long as you didn't fail in your rolling, like get beaten badly, like my side did in the last game. What was that, Operation Red Baron? He failed on this attack in Lorraine quite badly. I think he got it, if I remember correctly, but he barely got, or no, he didn't get it. I can't remember. Anyway, if you fail there, then that's a bad thing. Like, you have to commit to it. You have to go with as many units as you can. So that means moving 5 things down here, and probably going with your cavalry as well. And then of course you can take your fighter that can move 2 spaces. So you go with everything that you can into Lorraine, because you want to take it, and you want them to lose a lot of units taking it back. They've got a lot of stuff to take it back with, but you want them to be as weak as possible, because then you'll go next, right? And Germany is going to be able to put their full income worth of stuff down, the wartime income stuff, before France does. And Germany has more money than France to begin with. They don't have more than France and Britain together. Britain and France together have more than Germany, but that's why you're going fast, right? So you go as fast as you can to try to get in there. And you do have the advantage in that the river's on your side, so there's no penalty going in here. Like if they were coming the other way, then they have that river penalty, but not in this case with the Germans going. So that's something on the Western Front that you want to try to do, is to get in there as quickly as possible. And if you don't get that too handily, like you just barely get it, that's fine. That's okay. Just make sure that you bring stuff down here, so that when they do take it back, that hopefully you can take it again, because you're much better off with the line in Lorraine, like Germans in Lorraine, and stacking them up there than you are stacking them up in Bavaria. And one of the things that I didn't mention when I was going through the lay of the land there earlier with no units on is the territory values. Like that's worth 3 IPP. So that's a pretty big deal. That's 1 infantry less for the French and 1 infantry more for the Germans. And then you carry that over, like say 5-6 turns, right? That's a difference of 10 infantry. You're playing the long game, right? It's a numbers game, and over time that does make a difference. So that's one thing. The manpower icon, it's only worth 1, so like it would only be worth 1 to the Germans anyway. I'm just saying that for France it's only a loss of 1, so they're only going to go down to 9. It'd be better if it was worth 3 or something, because then you'd be taking 3 off them, but you're not. But the other thing when you're in Lorraine here is that that gives you more options. Like they have to defend Paris. They don't want to lose Paris, because then they're going to lose their money at the worst, at the best, and surrender at the worst. Like if they can't get Paris back, so they have to defend Paris, which leaves southern France and Picardy open. The British are going to come into Picardy. Hopefully, if like if you're the French player, you're hoping the British get there as quickly as they can. But that makes them have to defend 3 territories instead of having to defend 1 territory. And then, like, if you get bogged down there, like say you don't get there and you're just here and you just can't do anything, the British and the French are both there, then maybe you think at going into Belgium and spreading them out a bit. Like you'll get the feel of that. It's hard for me to explain exactly what you should do before it happens. Like you kind of have to feel it out, and learn trench lines. Like I said, that video that I just put out, that'll tell you a lot about trench lines, and just playing the game and learning the nuances and how to feel it out. That'll inform you as to better whether to spread that line out or keep it keep it narrow like this. The other thing about going first, and this is quite a big deal, a couple of games ago, we were playing online there, and Tim was the German player, and he did a really good job of this. So you try to develop gas as quickly as possible. Like if the Germans can be the first one to develop gas, then you can use that gas first, which means that you're going to negate the other guy's first strike. And so you just use it as quick as you can so that they don't use it against you. So first you buy the chlorine gas and you use it against them. You got first strike and +1. They don't have first strike. And then you go and you get the phosgene gas. You do the same thing and you get first strike. They don't get first strike. And then you got the mustard gas. And you use that and you get first strike and they don't get first strike. So again, you're trying to get it early in the game because there's not many units. Like if you look at the units on the board, it looks like quite a bit, right? But that's nothing compared to what's going to be on the board in say 3-4 turns from now. There's going to be a lot more units in there, and it's going to be a lot harder to get in there, especially considering that the defense has a big advantage in this game. So go as quickly as you can, get as far as you can, and then hunker down if you don't make it. That'll get you more money, and you'll be sitting in a better position, and that'll help you everywhere. Like if you're doing good on the Eastern Front as well, Germany's going to have lots of money, and you got to balance that with what's going on in the rest of the board. If you can afford to put some stuff down in Africa, then go for it. But I tell you, I wouldn't spend too much money down in Africa or in Asia. The points just aren't there for you. Like there's 1 point in each place. It matters whether Italy and Japan join one side or the other. Of course, those things matter. So these are things that are going to influence you. And the big thing that'll influence you besides what's going on the land is the battle in the Atlantic here. And that's something that we'll talk about in the next video. But one thing that does relate to this directly is buying submarines or cruiser raiders, because you can take them down 10 to 15 IPP every single turn if you invest enough money in those things. So if you forget about putting too much money in Africa and putting too much money in Asia, then you can afford to buy a submarine every turn and put as much stuff in here that you can afford. That's the thing, is trying to put as much stuff in here as you can possibly afford without completely forgetting about the rest of the board. That's important. Like early in the game, before Britain develops those technologies to hunt subs, that's the time to be hunting with your subs, because all they have is seaplanes. They'll have 2 seaplanes to begin with, and France has a seaplane down here to begin with. But the Americans aren't there, so they're not helping out with the seaplanes, and they don't have much defense. So that's something that you want to take advantage of early in the game, is get some subs in there and then get as many units in here going towards France as possible. But don't forget about this spot right here, Western Germany, because you're susceptible to an amphibious assault from the British from here. Now, at the beginning of the game, the British only have 1 transport, but that can change. So keep watching what they're doing. Are they going to buy more transports, right? So this is all early in the game, and you don't have to worry about a mandatory offensive, but at some point you are going to have to worry about it by the end of 1915. And so always plan on that as well. Make sure that you're thinking about that, and that you are going to get your mandatory offensive in, because you don't want to miss that. That's something that's really quite important. You look at it and you think, well, I don't know, like the penalties aren't that steep, but it all adds up. Every little thing adds up in this game, because the margins are so tight when you're talking about a defensive game like this. You're looking for any tiny little advantage, and you're trying to add up all those little advantages until you get an advantage over the other side, and then you get the momentum, and you hope that momentum carries you to break through on the Western Front. Okay, now let's flip this around and let's take a look at it from France's point of view. So pluses and minuses of the Allies are different than the ones of Germany, and I talked about Germany's. Now, the positives, first of all, there's cash and carry. So the Americans, when they reach a certain income level, they can do cash and carry, which means that the Allies can build units over in America, anything but infantry class, because as I mentioned earlier, like factories don't make men, right? So mostly what you'll be building over there are things like artillery, or maybe armored trains, maybe some boats if you're the British, anything that's made in a factory, but mostly artillery. So an artillery costs 5 IPP to make, or to build, and so you can get it for 4. If you build one and you do one through cash and carry, then that's 9 IPP. So there you got 2 artillery for the price of 3 infantry, and that's pretty good. Now, 2 artillery would normally cost you 10, and that's more than the price of 3 infantry. So, it's a little more difficult to do it that way. So you can do that. And also, because America's not in the war, besides being able to do this cash and carry, you can also get lend-lease from them as well. And so, they could send you an artillery, and you could build the artillery with cash and carry. And then you have all of your money left to buy infantry, and you've just built 2 artillery. So that's a big advantage right there. The other thing is that the British and the French navies combined are both pretty strong. Like the British Navy is the strongest, the German Navy is the second strongest, but the French Navy is by far the third strongest. Everybody after that is much smaller, right? So if you combine the British and the French Navy, that opens up a lot of different possibilities for you. It's not just a matter of, you know, like a brute force against the German Navy, because they are separated by the German Navy being in the Baltic Sea already. But it does help with defense, but it also helps to open up other possibilities besides the Western Front. So, and that it forces the Central Powers to have to defend in more places when you have more possibilities like that. Now, the turn order, the advantage of the turn order for the other guys, like Germany, we talked about that, and it's obvious they get to go first, so they get to take the first shot. But the advantage of not being first in the turn order is that you get the last shot before wintertime. So, like, especially in summertime, Germany goes, and then the British go, and then the French go. And after that, that's when the wintertime comes in. So you can take that last shot knowing that when Germany takes their shot next turn, if they're going to take one, that they only have one round to do it in for a land combat. And so it's like having a trench line, right? That is actually a pretty big advantage. There's a couple more things. Like, first of all, there's the Americans. They're the wild card. So that doesn't help you that much early in the game. But late in the game, the Americans coming over to Europe, if they can, I mean, if they're not distracted by other things, and there's ways that you can distract them as the Central Powers. But if the Americans do come over to Europe, they're not really going to take over like they might be able to in the 36 game, because they do come in awfully late. But they may get there in time to stop the Germans if the Germans are about to take Paris, or they're about to overrun somebody. Then the Americans might be able to get there, but before that happens. And then also you have the Russians on the Eastern Front. They're a little bit stronger than the Austrians are, because, I mean, you could say that it's a wash having the Austrians on the one side and the Russians on the other. But the Russians have the potential to be stronger than the Austrians do, and that doesn't happen every game, you know, especially with rolling the way it goes, right? The Russians could be overrun pretty quickly as well. But if they're not, like if they're strong, then that really helps the Allies on the Western Front, because Germany just simply can't spend as much money as possible and use all those manpower icons in the West. They're going to have to use a lot of them to put troops into the East as well. And so those are some of the positives. The negatives, there's really only one big one, and that is that they are both smaller than the Germans are. Like the British are not really, but they're spread out all over the world, whereas the Germans are just right here. And they've only got the West and the Eastern Front to worry about. The Germans could spread themselves around the world too, but they don't need to. What they really need to do is just to secure this area right here. And so they're going to be stronger than the British in Europe, and they're certainly going to be stronger than the French when it comes to the amount of money that they have, and probably the amount of units they're going to have on the board. They're stronger than them individually, but together the Allies are as strong as the Germans. You know, it's pretty close. They might be a little stronger, they might be a little weaker, but the problem is that they don't attack together. So even if you had the same number of units on the Western Front here, like you had 50 units here for the Allies and 50 units here for the Germans, when it comes to attacking, the British attack and then the French attack, they don't attack together. And that's a problem, because, you know, if the Germans are stronger than each of them, and defense is stronger than offense in the game, then it's really hard for the Allies to attack the Germans. But they do defend together. And so It's not like the Germans can just go in and attack one of them. They have to attack both of them if they're both in the same territory. And so defense is just as strong. It's the offense that is not as strong. And so typically what you'll see is the Germans are on the offense on the Western Front. You know, like that could change because of the rolling. Like I talked about the Germans and how you need to outroll them early in the game to get the big advantage. If you don't outroll them, like if they outroll you, then it could be the opposite. It could be the Germans on the back foot the whole game. Like you might have watched Operation Red Baron there. The Germans were on their back foot the whole game. And that's because early in the game, the rolling was decidedly against them. The French beat them in the rolling early on, and that put them in a hole right off the bat. And so that can happen. So when it comes to France, France really doesn't have to do anything else in the game. They don't have to worry about Africa. Like last game I played, I didn't put a single unit in Africa. Maybe one, I can't remember. Maybe just one. But the only thing I spent money on besides the Western Front was I put some units in southern France, and I put them on a transport and took them over to fight the Ottomans. And also I think I took some over to fight the Austrians. But that was only after France was secured. So France, they're actually a pretty easy nation to play. Like if you're playing with new players and, you know, somebody wants to play more than just one of the minor powers like Japan or something, you know, France is actually pretty easy to play because it's really straightforward. It's just ground units fighting back and forth in here. Plus you have some Navy. So that person does get an opportunity to play with Navy as well. There's little fights that they'll have, particularly down in Africa, but most of it is right here. And so it's really quite easy to play the French. I think that you would probably still want to help them out if they were a new player because there is a lot of nuance to doing this. But it's pretty straightforward though once you learn it, right? And a lot of it's going to come down to that rolling. But mostly what you're going to be doing there is a lot of defending. And you can't just defend with your infantry. I refer again back to that video, the last video I made on trench lines. Like having tons of infantry is great because on a trench line they're going to defend at 6, which, you know, is even better than defending with artillery at 5, but the artillery defending is defending on first strike, and that's a pretty big deal, right? So a combination of both is what you really want. And also you're never going to go on offense if you don't have that artillery, and so you really need it. As I mentioned earlier in the video as well, you can get the elite units up to France pretty easily. So you do have a transport down in southern France there to begin the game, and you have enough naval units there that transport is going to be safe. And they do start with a couple of other transports in the game as well that you're not really using anywhere else. So you could get 3 transports for the French into the Mediterranean there, and that opens up a lot of possibilities for you if you're not besieged by Germany. And that's a big if, right? But anyway, like you can go down to Africa and you can pick up those elite infantry, and that will help you doing some attacks, right? Whether you take them somewhere else in the Med or whether you take them up to the Western Front, they can be quite handy for attacking, because anything more than a 2 when you're attacking is good. Most things attack at 2 or less, and so having one attack at 3 and then combining it with an artillery so it's attacking at 4, wow, that's a luxury. And so it's nice for France to have that. The fact that they're also mountain infantry doesn't really help you on the Western Front. I mean, we talked about the terrain there, so that's not a big deal, but it's always nice to have elite infantry, and the fact that we lowered the price on them for version 2 of the game, that helps as well. It helps all the nations, but of course it's going to help France with them being right next door where they can build them. Anyway, like I said, it's pretty straightforward though, And with the trench fighters that I talked about, or sorry, with the railroads that I talked about in that last video, if the Germans build a lot of trains, then that's pretty easy to defend. If you get too many trains coming in against you and you don't need the railways yourself, you just damage the railways, and there's nothing the Germans can do about that. I mean, they can repair them, but then you damage them again before they can use them. So, you know, buying too many trains isn't going to help either side. And that includes the French. Like if the French just decide to build a lot of trains, then, you know, the Germans just have to damage the railways if they want. We didn't do that in the last game. I'm still trying to teach people how to play the game and everything. And that's something that I just didn't think of in the last game as well. My mind was on other things, but it is something that's there. So, you know, don't put all your stock into buying too many trains, whether you're France or whether you're on the other side. And Britain's never going to build too many trains, just being an island nation like they are. You know, like they're going to have to bring them across, right? Let me move down to the other side of the board there. So with France, really what you're going to be doing is you're going to be concentrating on Lorraine and southern France, and you're hoping that the British can come across and take care of Picardy for you. The British have to do something, and so if they defend Picardy, that's great. And if the Germans don't break through Belgium, then it just becomes a shuck. You're bringing guys to Picardy and then they're bringing them over to Lorraine. But the French, all they really have to concentrate is on Lorraine. And if Lorraine gets taken out, like it does in quite a number of the games, then you're going to have to spread yourself out. You're going to have to defend both southern France and Paris. And, you know, like, it's only if you get really far behind that you just go back to Paris and keep it. Because if you give up too much of your land, you know, like you're giving up too many of your manpower icons and too much of your money. Like there's not a lot of money left if you take out Picardy and you take out southern France and you take out Lorraine. That's what, 6-7 IPP right there. Like that's a third of your money. You know, like Paris is only worth 3, and then Aquitaine and Normandy are only worth 1 each. And then they're not going to have a lot of money elsewhere on the board. There's a bit of it, but it's not like Britain, where they've got lots of stuff around the world and they're going to have lots of money regardless. That's just not going to happen with the French. And so you do need to hang on to what you can. And also you need to hang on to those manpower icons, like I said, because if you lose these ones, then you've only got 5 left in here. You've got 3 in Paris, and then you've got 1 and 1 over here. And plus you're putting them back behind, you know, like you really need them up on the front line. And sure, you know, you can get them there. It's just going to be delayed. But it's you're going to have to get them there. So if Germany does take that first shot, like I talked about with the German section there, and they go for Lorraine, no matter what, you got to try to take them back. You can't just say, well, they got it really strong and, you know, I'll just hang back here. No, you got to take your best shot at taking that back. Throw everything into it. Don't worry about, you know, the next turn. Throw everything at that. Don't ever just do something half-assed when you're playing this game, no matter who you are. Don't just spread yourself out and do 4 different attacks or whatever. Like, you're better off doing one overwhelming attack, and that's what you're going to want to do. If the Germans take Lorraine, you're going to want to go with as much as you can. And even if you break the trench line, but you lose a lot of units, then you might consider going back to Paris and not going for the second round of attack. Just taking them out on that first round is good, taking out a lot of them. Hopefully you do, right? Hopefully you get enough. And there is a bit of offense there. Like you do have 3 fighters and you've got 3 artillery, and you do have a fighter there as well. You've got a couple of cavalry there. So that's going to help on offense, and hopefully you can get a few units off them. because the next turn, like happens in the summer, the next turn is going to be winter, and Germany's only going to have one shot at you after that. So, they might not even try to attack you because it's going to be difficult. And when you are defending in Paris, all of your infantry class units, whether they're the militia, like you'll want to bring your militia up, it doesn't matter what kind of infantry class units are, they're +1 in a city. And so that's going to help you. Plus, they're going to have that target selection if they do roll a 1. And that's going to help as well, because, that could be the difference between Germany having a trench line or not having a trench line. And if you're not anywhere close to breaking their trench line, then you take their artillery off. And, you losing cavalry or infantry and them losing artillery, well, that's going to close the gap in the numbers game, isn't it? So having that target selection, even though it's only a 1, when you're rolling lots of dice, though, like if you're rolling 10 or more dice, then you've got a pretty good chance at getting 1 or 2 1s in there, so that's going to help you, and you have to use that wisely. Like I said, it's very nuanced, right? And so you have to get a feel for the kind of things that you do. Taking casualties is huge in the Western Front, how you take them. That's why it's kind of hard to play the game over YouTube, because, like you ask the other guy, hey, look, I'm going to attack Paris, what order do you want your casualties in? Like you can give them the order of casualties, but really, I mean, it depends on how many units they get on first strike, right? Like how many units they take off with their artillery, like if they only take 2 units off, well, maybe you do decide to take infantry instead of artillery, whereas if they got a lot of hits, then you're probably going to want to take artillery, because you're going to need those infantry just to maintain a trench line. So it's difficult to play over YouTube for that reason. But, like it's impossible to play a lot of times without playing over the internet like that, because like here in town, there's just me and James, and like we don't often get 3 days to play a game with each other. In fact, it's been quite a while since we've actually played a game in person that wasn't at the Sky Marshal Cup. And so, like just getting people together to play this game is difficult. So you do what you can, and, it's not perfect, but you can do it though. Yeah, like I said, France is pretty straightforward. Use as much money as you can and spend just about all of it in France. Don't worry about everywhere else, unless you're secure. If you're secure, if you know that Germany's not going to get through there, then you can start taking chances in other places. Start getting on those transports and maybe taking out Constantinople, taking a shot at it at least, or taking some stuff over to Austria-Hungary. And diplomacy, like I didn't mention diplomacy at all so far in this video, but that's going to help you as well. Like if no matter if you're any one of those 3 nations that we talk about for the Western Front here, just as everybody else, it's going to help them. Well, France is really going to help. Like for one thing, you don't want somebody popping up in Spain behind you, right? It would be better if you got Spain, but you never know. You never know if that's going to happen or not. And then, of course, Italy. Where's Italy going to go? Are they going to go Central Powers, or are they going to go Allies? Now, if they're Allies, the French are going to control them, and that's a good thing. But they're not going to really be an offensive weapon for you until maybe later in the game, if nobody takes them out. Like if the Austro-Hungarians don't really concentrate on them and they let them get large, then sure, they can become an offensive weapon. But chances are they're just going to be sitting there. Be a bigger deal if they went towards the Central Powers, like if they're controlled by Austria-Hungary. Wow, the Western Front just got a lot bigger, didn't it? Because now you have to defend southern France from Austria-Hungary and from Italy, coming through into southern France down here, and that's not ideal. I don't like your chances if that happens. Although, it's not the end of the world. And again, it's different for Germany than it is for France. Because if Berlin falls, then that's pretty much it for the Central Powers. In fact, Bob and I talked about that, and we're thinking about in the next version of the rules that if Germany surrenders, then it's basically the war ends. Not the game, because there could be the Soviets created by then, and so you'd still you just go right to the Russian Revolution if it's already started. But if Berlin falls, then probably it should just be game over, and the Central Powers should just lose. They shouldn't have an opportunity to count their points, because in reality, I mean, if Germany surrenders, then what are the Austro-Hungarians and the Ottomans going to do in reality, right? Nothing. They're not going to do anything against the major powers that are coming against them. But if Paris falls, it's not the end of the game for the Allies, because the Allies are stronger, especially later in the game, than the Central Powers are. And, like if you can keep Russia, Imperial Russia in the game, keep them from going to revolution, and then the Americans get in it, and they will get in it earlier probably if Paris falls, then, you can make a game of it. Although it's definitely an advantage for the Central Powers at that point if Paris falls. But like I said, it's not the end of the game. You can still carry on, and then just see, like, if things don't go well on the Eastern Front, then you might think about surrendering, right? But you can come back from it. You can come back from Paris falling. Your chances of winning the game aren't great, but you theoretically could. Anyway, there's not much more to say about France. Just defend as hard as you can, and if you do get a chance, like if Germany falters, then move up. Go for Bavaria. Just know that it's going to be difficult getting in there. You've got that river you've got to cross, and you're definitely going to need to be a lot stronger than they are before you go on offense. That's for sure. Anyway, let's move on. So when it comes to Britain, they're not an easy nation to play. The last game we played, the British player was probably the most experienced player in our game, and it was difficult for him to play it. He had such a problem playing it. They did win the game, but I mean, he was playing with a couple of really experienced players, and that was a big help to him. But it wasn't, he did have a lot of difficulty in managing them, because there's so much for you to do. And even on the Western Front, it's tricky, because it's not as straightforward as what I just talked about with France. France, you just buy as much as you can and defend yourself. Britain, it's a lot different, because you're trying to decide how much to put into the Western Front. Like you're hoping that France defends itself well, and that you don't have to put the maximum amount that you can possibly afford in there. So like France, you can do the cash and carry thing. If you buy an artillery and you get an artillery through cash and carry, there you go. You probably don't need to get more than 2 artillery per turn. And even if you do, you're going to have more than 2 transports. So you start the game off with 1 transport in this sea zone right here, and you've got lots of other boats in there. And then there's 3 more transports that you start the game off with. One's in South Africa, one's in India, and one is in Australia. Now, those other 3 transports are transports that you could use elsewhere on the board. And the problem with bringing them up here to the home country is that this is the only place where you have a shipyard. Well, I guess you do have one in Australia, but it's a long ways from anywhere, right? Building transports down there isn't really a good idea. Like, you're better off just building them here. So I don't know that you can bring a transport back here, because you're probably going to want to have one down in the other places anyway. You should probably have at least 2 in India, so you think, well, if the one in Australia survives, you're able to get it up to India, that's great. Maybe you can bring the one from South Africa up, but it's a lot better to have 3 transports down in India and the Mediterranean there. You know, you'd love to have 5 transports down there and 5 transports up here, but the more transports you buy, the less money you have to build infantry and artillery on the Western Front and in other places as well, right? You can't just sacrifice everything else on the board and put everything into the Western Front like you can with France. You do have to put units down in Africa to take out the Germans down there. Otherwise, you know, if you fall asleep down there, the Germans can all of a sudden throw some units down there, and now the Africa is going to the Central Powers because there's not a lot of units down there. I mean, you do have the advantage down there with the British, but if you don't use that advantage, then it's useless. And also you need to build a lot of units because you're the only one that's going to be fighting the Ottomans. The Russians are going to be defending themselves. And so you do have to commit a significant number of resources into fighting over the Middle East and taking the pressure off the Russians by doing that. And so, you know, like it's a balancing act between the Western Front and the Middle East and Africa. And the fourth thing is maintaining your Navy, because the Allies have the advantage in the seas over the Central Powers, but it's because of the British Navy. Like Germany is, you know, when you start the game, Germany has got just as strong a Navy in the Baltic Sea as the British have in the British Isles. So you're going to need to bring some Navy home so that you have an advantage over the British. And I've played this game where I've lost the British Navy before, and I've seen another game where the British Navy was lost. And if you lose the British Navy, then you're screwed. You and the Allies are screwed, because the British aren't going to be able to get their mandatory offensives in without that Navy and getting units over to France. You can't put in the infantry over there that you need to get your mandatory offensive in. And when you don't get that in, then you're going to miss out on all of the automatic alignments from the neutrals. And Britain has more than anybody when it comes to automatic alignments. And so you're going to be losing out big time. Not to mention the fact that you're putting France in a really bad position if you can't get units over there. So what you need to do is you need to get enough infantry and artillery and enough transports to get over there. So first of all, you've got this right here, this narrow crossing. You see the number 3 there. You can get 3 units over there, infantry class units. So you can walk 3 infantry over there. So I would recommend at least 2 transports. It's better if you have 3, but you know, you don't need 3 up front. You don't need to buy 3 or 2 more as soon as you can. You can buy 1 and then a little bit later buy another one, right? Because like I said, you got a lot of things you need to do with your money, but you're going to need that second one pretty quick, because this way here, you're only going to get 1 artillery with 1 transport. You're going to get 1 artillery and 1 infantry out of it, plus 3 infantry. That's only 4 infantry and an artillery. You're much better off getting 5 infantry and 2 artillery over every single turn. So then you've got 3 manpower icons here, you've got 1 here, and you've got 3 back in northern England. Here, let's just take a look over here. So yeah, you've got 3 here, 1 here, 3 here, 1 up in Scotland. You're not always going to need all of these manpower icons, but you're going to want to fill them up as much as you can. Remember, like everybody, don't forget to protect your capital, because the Germans, like I said, they got a huge navy. And if you move down to here, that leaves London open. And you know, it's likely you will be there, right? But that will leave London open, and you could lose your capital if you fall asleep on that. You can't lose London. Did I mention you can't lose London? That would be a bad idea. Anyway, so it's not a bad idea to have extra units on Britain at all times anyway. So fill up these manpower icons early, as much as you possibly can afford, And even if you don't take all the units across every single time, it's nice to have a couple of extras every single turn, right? Now, if you're putting 3 infantry in London every single turn, like that should just be an automatic. 3 infantry in London, okay, now what else? Like you want to buy another infantry, you put it here, and you put an artillery in London. There you go, that's 1 transport worth, right? And then you start doing cash and carry with the Americans, and so then you've got another transport, and you put another guy probably up here, and then you walk them down, and so you got to do that a turn ahead of time, right? So you got to think about that. If I'm going to buy a transport this turn, I'm going to want to have somebody else that I can bring down, and you just keep putting as many units into France as possible. And then when it comes to mandatory offensives, one of the coolest moves that you can do, if you have 3 transports, you can come over here. You're going to want to use dreadnoughts when you do this, because there's actually, I didn't put them on here, let me grab one. There's a coastal artillery right there. And the coastal artillery is going to get shot at your amphibiously assaulting ships. There we go, put that in there. And so if you have dreadnoughts, then you're not going to lose any ships, are you? But anyway, you bring 3 transports and your whole navy over here, and you can attack Western Germany with 6 infantry, just 6 infantry. You don't want to bring any artillery or anything, because, you know, like whether you go here or whether you go wherever the Germans are, whether it's Lorraine or Bavaria, you're going to lose those 6 infantry probably. We're talking like if you're just going to run 6 infantry in there without the rest of your troops, right? Just to get your mandatory offensive in. If you go here, then you're going to have 6 landing shots with your boats, like assuming that they don't hit you with the coastal artillery. You start with, I think it's pretty easy to get 4 dreadnoughts on the board. If you don't have them on the board, then I think you have them on the production chart. And so, you know, there's 4 dreadnoughts and 2 pre-dreadnoughts. That's 4 at 4 and 2 at 3. You know, you might get 2 or 3 hits out of those. And if Germany falls asleep over here, like they've only got 5 or 6 units in Western Germany, thinking they're pretty secure, all of a sudden you come over here, you do a bunch of landing shots, then you've got your 6 infantry rolling at once, and that's not a very good attack, having 6 infantry at one, but it's those landing shots, you know, I'm just saying it might be a better attack than just throwing away 6 infantry into Bavaria, where they are going to get killed on the first round when Germany's got like 15 or 20 infantry and a shitload of artillery, right? So that's something that you can do. Not something you can get away with every time, but, you know, something that is actually possible for you. So that's something to think about. Make sure you get your mandatory offensives in. Make sure that you have your enough units over there in place so that somewhere you can get that mandatory offensive in. Because like I said, Britain has to have their mandatory offensives because of those automatic alignments. Like that's a really big deal, because if you miss the automatic alignment, it's gone for the rest of the game, right? And it's not coming back. After that, you're going to have to influence them, and there's some good ones in there too. You know, Portugal's got a ship in there, plus it's got a few territories, and Belgium and Greece, and, you know, like there's some good nations in there that you can pick up for free without having to spend your money on diplomatically influencing them. Anyway, so one other thing I should probably mention, even though this is something that I'm going to go into more detail with when it comes to the naval battle in the next video that I'm going to do, is when it comes to this narrow crossing over here, if Germany puts a submarine in there, then you can't go across that narrow crossing. So if you're Germany, then you probably want to do that. And especially early in the game, because the only thing you could take that out with is a seaplane. and you know, like a seaplane goes over there, takes a shot at them, misses. I mean, it's only a 25% chance at hitting them. Then you know, like then you miss, and you don't get those three guys across the water that you want to get across. So that's a pretty big deal. And they can also do the same thing with the cruiser raider. That's something that we'll go into in greater detail with the ships. There's a lot of little things that you need to know about, but that's something that relates more to this video with trying to get units over to France. It would be great if you could influence the Netherlands here or Belgium, because that's a place where you could set up shop over there. Like if you get the Netherlands, there's a free factory for you there. So you can put an artillery and an infantry there because there's a factory, like we're talking a regular infantry. So then you're bringing stuff across on transports here, and you're using that mandatory icon, or sorry, the narrow crossing icon to get units over here. So you're putting units in both places. That's going to be tough for the Germans to deal with. For one thing, it's going to spread them out. Like you're going to have the big Western Front. And if you're willing to commit enough resources in there, that's going to be hard to handle. You're going to keep Germany on the back foot. At the same time, you don't want to lose the Netherlands. But I mean, getting the Netherlands with influence, and it doesn't just help you here. That's going to get you lots of extra territories and lots of extra boats. Like they got a pretty good navy here. I think 4 ships, including 2 transports. They start with 1, and then a few turns into the war, then another one goes onto the board. So, you know, there's the transports that you wish you had, right? Yeah, they're sitting right there in the Netherlands, and all of a sudden they become British. So that's a huge help if you can get the Netherlands to get those boats and the other territories and all that money. I mean, you'd just be styling out if you can do that. With all that money the British get, doing a lot of the influencing as well. And hopefully you roll well when you do it, right? When it comes to that peacetime income, so they've got a pretty decent peacetime income of 4. When it comes, you know, relative to the other ones. It's not as good as their 35 wartime income, but they don't have many units. So it is nice to be able to put some units into, like, saving some money or putting some units in to your reserves. Also, you're gonna need some, probably more seaplanes, because, you know, well, it depends on what the Germans do. If the Germans never buy a submarine, then you're not going to need more seaplanes. But I tell you, if they start buying submarines, that can eat into your money pretty fast, right? So you're going to need to defend yourself with against them. And early in the game, all you've got is seaplanes to stop them until you develop the technologies to help you out with that. But as far as what you have in reserves, though, there's not much here. Not like Germany that has 6 infantry and France that has 5 infantry, right? So that's a bit of a problem for you. It's unlikely that Germany's going to attack you here on the first turn. I don't think it's a very good idea, but you know what? You can try it if you want, see how it works out for you. It's not that you can't get it. It's just that, does that help you win the game? Like, that's the big question, right? So, you know, like, that's something that the Germans can think about. But if they don't get it, well, they've exposed their navy, and, you know, the British are going to jump all over them. And, you know, like, it's a low chance of getting it to begin with only 1 transport. And maybe if they buy another one, and, you know, that's kind of sacrifices what they're doing with the prequel if they're spending money on their navy. So, you know, like, that's not going to help them either, right? Everything you do is a choice in the game. And if Germany makes those kind of choices, then they're going to have to sacrifice something else, just as you're going to have to as the British player. I don't think you're going to need to build any more factories in the home country. Like, it's kind of weird that there isn't a factory here. You can't actually put any artillery there. That's probably where your cash and carry artillery is going to go. But anyway, it is kind of weird that there isn't any artillery there. Or, I mean, isn't any factory there. But that's okay, though, because, I mean, you can put 5 units here at this factory here, and that's going to be good enough, because I don't think you're going to even fill that up at all during the game. It's not like you need it to build ships or anything. That's what you have shipyards for. So I've given you a lot to think about here. This is just one aspect of the game, although it's a huge aspect of the game, the Western Front. You have to balance what you're doing on the Western Front with what you're doing on the rest of the board as well. But, you know, like, that's what makes this game a lot of fun. If it was too easy, then it wouldn't be much of a challenge, would it? So this is something that you will have to master, though, is the nuances of the Western Front. What looks like it should be easy is really not that easy. Like, it's pretty straightforward, and it isn't. You know, a lot of nuance in there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it's been informative for you. So I'm going to leave you with that, and we'll get to a naval video next, probably in a week or so. Anyway, take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.